Excellences, Mesdames.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for receiving me so warmly. This is the first time I'm attending this conference, the 11th edition. In light of the debate and the quality of the speakers and the participants, I can promise you that I will try to come back as often as possible. The topic to be covered is whether or not the insurance sector can be a safe refuge against risks. When you look at the word a refuge, this is a place where you are protected against threats. And indeed, insurance protects you against threats and risks. That's your business, that is your job. But behind that, there is a business model. You have premia and the financing of insurance companies. Insurance must work well, it must be profitable for it to also be a refuge value. And that is less and less the case at the stock market because of huge constraints. So, this is the meaning of refuge that I wanted to stress. I won't speak about this aspect in my presentation because this afternoon I am on the panel discussion that will cover the challenges of very low interest rates today. But I will speak now more about what insurance can do as an institution and companies protecting us against risks and threats. Threats, I won't repeat all the threats already mentioned by Florence here and yesterday at the delightful dinner at a wonderful occasion. But about threats, you have national and international threats. On national threats, just one word. Threats may and grow much more rapidly today than in the past. And this is something that insurance people must be careful about. I'm thinking of Chile. Last week I was at the International Monetary Fund and speaking with the Minister of the Environment and Minister of Finance of Chile. I was there a few hours late and I said to Felipe, I'm delighted to be in Santiago. I will be going there for the Conference of the Parties on the 25th. I'm delighted to come, and you are the most stable country in South America. And he said, yes, Pierre, it's true, or was true until yesterday. So I looked at the news and I couldn't believe it. And we could see that this crisis is lasting. So national threats can come about swiftly, calling for swift action by policymakers and for you insurers. I think this is a variable for which you need to be prepared. International threats are well known. I like to stress one in particular, as is nicely said in English, self inflicted damage, when you call into question multilateralism and global trade. That is something that's purely political. It doesn't depend on any economic crises or any wars. It is states. And unfortunately, we know that there are more and more states that have started to doubt the benefits of multilateral trade that is open, and that is very worrying. Plus, more and more nationalism in many countries. So, with the fact of calling into question multilateralism and multilateral trade organized around the World Trade Organization, of course, we are seeing political developments that we cannot overlook. What about Europe? I will speak a bit about Europe in my introduction and in my conclusion. We have an extraordinary talent, as stressed last night by Nicoletta in his speech. We never speak positively about Europe. He said that we are pessimistic. It's true. We are pessimistic by nature, apparently, in most European countries, but we cannot communicate intelligently and positively about all the good things we do. I was telling Enrico Leta, and he, well, at the time he was prime minister. When I went to the first ECOFIN in Mali in 2013, I was very lucky. That was the ECOFIN where we agreed on the banking union. It was my first meeting, and I said, "You are so lucky to be there the day we reach an agreement." So the day afterwards, I thought we would read in the press that Europe agrees on a banking union that protects us. It's something unique in the world. No other region of the world has a protection of its banking system that is mutualized. So I thought that tomorrow we'll see. That was in December 2013. Europe has agreed on a banking union. This is extraordinary. No. A small print. Agreement on banking union, big caps. They will never succeed in setting it up. That's not what the minister said, but that's what the media said. Afterwards, we implemented the banking union, and it works not badly. As I say in Paris, that means very good. When they say that in Paris, let's say it works well, and certainly there is some room to improve. But it's extraordinary what we did here. We reduced our risks tremendously. And yet we spend our time still criticizing the banking union. We can do better, but we need to improve in communication. How is Europe faring? In terms of its economy, relatively good, as opposed to what you read every day in the media. Last year, in 2018, we had a growth in all countries in the Eurozone of around 2 to 2.5%. Throughout the Eurozone, all countries abiding by the Stability Pact and Growth Pact were reducing their debt and so on. Secondly, that's really doing well in Europe. We created 11 million jobs in 5 years. If you had told me that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. As a matter of fact, many people said we don't know how to solve the problem of unemployment in Europe. And they explained a whole host of things to justify why we're no longer creating jobs. 5 years later, we realize we're creating 11 million jobs like we've never done since the 60s. So let us be more optimistic. More optimistic, and let us spread the good news that things work well. One last thing, I regularly go to China. Currently, there's a paradox. The two champions of world trade, the two parts of the world that defend a multilateral system, are Europe and China. If you're to look at the triangle between the United States and China and the European Union, there's only the base of the triangle between Europe and China that wants to keep the markets open. In this triangular relationship, China and Europe must absolutely move as one, which is paradoxical because we know that the United States were the first to speak about the virtues of multilateral trade and being open to the world. So the economy is doing better than is said. It doesn't mean that everything is going well. I think the greatest weakness in Europe today is too low an investment rate. That was said by Jacques de la Rosière this morning. Look at the statistics. We have not been able to attain a level of investments in Europe that is percentage-wise equivalent to what we had before the crisis of 2008. In 10 years' time, we have a deficit that we must absolutely fill in. That is an absolute priority for Europe in the coming years, to arrive at an investment level that's higher. And insurance can play a role in this field. Without trying to be too original, I would say that there are two main challenges, in addition to investments, I'll come back to that at the end, for the insurance sector and for finance in general. First of all, digitization of the economy, and secondly, climate change. In both areas, you have a fundamental role to play. I believe that you should be aware of this and seize opportunities. Naturally, with digitization, artificial intelligence, we can deliver insurance services much more efficiently than in the past. I was talking with my German colleague about the importance of the insurance sector in the world. And Europe is losing market shares, whereas the United States and China in particular are gaining market shares. One of the reasons is due to regulations. I'll come back to that. But the second reason is that the other regions around the world are moving faster in digitization. For example, out of the 100 biggest companies in artificial intelligence, there are only 4 that are European. Take the unicorns in fintech, there are only 5 out of 39 that are European. So we're lagging behind in this field. What should we do? Of course, there are things to be done at European level, and there are things that can be done at national level. We created the Luxembourg House of Fintech, a public-private initiative. I believe that we must do more public-private initiatives in Europe. Probably we are the part of the world where we know how to do that. And this is how we can create more powerful incubators and work at European level. I'm not very optimistic, therefore, when I look at the state of affairs today as regards Europe's capacities when it comes to digitization for it to be in the lead, especially as we have set up the GDPR regulations with 2 points to be stressed. First of all, we're very proud of GDPR because we've innovated a lot, and a lot of intellectuals and companies around the world say what you've done is wonderful. About 20 states in the United States use it as a source of inspiration, starting with California. Great. But just take a look at what's happening in China. Of course, there are no general regulations on data protection. It's quite the opposite. Everything is quite available and transparent. 1 month ago, I went to the Pinhan site in Shenzhen. It's quite impressive. I urge you all to pay them a visit, because when you go to the ground floor to see how they control in real time everything, is amazing. 300 million clients. Can you imagine? Or contracts. And you see the figure moving all the time because it's real time. That is quite amazing to begin with. And then you look at the number of brokers in the company, of agents, 1.8 million employees. The figure changes all the time, of course. And then they tell you, we have been able, in less than 10 minutes, to be at a traffic incident, wherever it is in China. I'm saying you are joking. Not even in Luxembourg, we can't be there in 10 minutes' time. And it's a small country. But yes, they said it's quite simple. We have cameras everywhere, throughout China. Face recognition throughout China. Data protection. And thanks to that, in less than 10 minutes, they have pictures that are sent to the parent company and processed by artificial intelligence in just a few seconds. And if the damage is less than 5,000 renminbi, no, 5,000, about 50 or 60 euros, you are paid within a minute. Just imagine, that is done in China today. Now, you're talking about data protection. How do you want in future, and in future, that's in a few months or years, to be competitive with respect to that society? I like the protection of private life and data protection, but these people are so advanced technologically that the day they come on our markets and they meet all the conditions of data protection, but they'll have the financial and technological resources that will be greater than ours. So I am worried. Secondly, I'm worried too because for many different reasons. You have the big players, the GAFAs, as we call them, who will come on your turf, your specialities. Last was Amazon proposing services in health through its network. That was just launched. We don't know if it will be a resounding success or not, but that gives you the two major risks. One, a country like China that does not respect a private life. That's its system. It's always been like that. And secondly, the big players in the digital economy that will also deliver insurance services. Secondly, and here I'm more optimistic than on digitization, climate change, because I believe that here Europe is truly in the lead, because intellectually speaking, just like for the protection of private life, we have recognized the importance of this issue that goes far beyond all others, and the players are better prepared, so we can be better placed to use the potential that we have in this field. You may know that I'm wearing a pins. I'm not a pins man, okay? This was just a few weeks ago because I think it's so fundamental to save our planet and that it is so fundamental to develop sustainable finance that I want to remind myself of that every day. I would like to tell you that in finance, including banks and insurance, but finance will be sustainable or will no longer be there. The advantage of bankers and financial services that they have a lot of know-how, and you must build on that know-how, but you need to develop products with that open, green products. Call it what you will, but you're better positioned than your competitors. But you need to develop these products faster than your potential competitors, and here Europe will help us with its regulations that are being drafted and almost finished on what is green taxonomy, as the Commission called it very nicely. I told them that it's strange to put tax everywhere, but they told me it was another word for taxonomy, but we understand what it means. It's all about having regulations and then making it possible to avoid money laundering or artificial greening of products. If we succeed, and I'm confident that we will replicate the success of investment funds. Because what we have been able to do with investment funds, you know that Luxembourg is an important player in this field, and Paris as well, is that we were able to reach an agreement on a regulatory framework at European level, and this standard has become a global standard because other regions around the world have not been able to reach an agreement amongst themselves because they're too much competitors, and we integrate much further than the rest of the world, so I've been able to agree on something as complex. So if we agree on taxonomy, and I believe that that is imminent, we'll have a tool to become the champions of sustainable finance, or that is what I hope for us and for you. Luxembourg, there are two things to be stressed. 2 years ago, we launched the Luxembourg Green Exchange, stemming from the Luxembourg stock market, listing green bonds exclusively. So on this stock exchange, you can only list bonds that meet all possible criteria to be green bonds. Today, only a half of green bonds around the world are listed on that stock exchange. The World Bank, for example, lists all of its green bonds there. This is an interesting initiative. Why? Because it puts the emphasis on the fact that the future is about green bonds. Bad news. Do you know how many green bond issues you have as compared to total issues? Less than 3%. It used to be 2, so we're growing. We're coming closer to 3, but we still have a long way to go. Secondly, investment funds. In Luxembourg, we have roughly 4,500 billion in assets under management. In dollars, that's 5,000 billion, so that's huge. Of course, we need to green all of that. That's how we will be able to mobilize the necessary capital, because the goals set by Europe and set by all of us in Paris at COP21 to achieve these goals when it comes to saving our planet, that will call for the fullest support of the private sector and especially banks and insurers. Because if we only rely on public means, we're talking about billions, but we need thousands of billions. To conclude, I would say that the real challenge is therefore greening the climate and the investments that it must and can generate. And here, Europe is the only solution. I spoke about taxonomy. I'm talking about issues dear to you as well, Solvency II, and the rules that need to be modernized. And I say this clearly, as Luxembourg will do everything in our power together with France, because I think we have the same position. We should not overload the ship. In other words, we should not further increase the ratios and requirements because it will discourage insurers from investing in the real economy and in infrastructures. I spoke about market shares that are declining for Europe, and ahead of us, thanks to climate change, or because of climate change, we have huge needs. And insurers, you have huge reserves that you must be able to diversify. So I'm making a plea, and I can see that Little Pie is well represented at the highest level so that we can have an economic discussion on this and not only a regulatory discussion. So you can see, therefore, that I started speaking about Europe and I'll end up speaking about Europe. And this is the only way for us to make progress on this continent because Europe is much more than the sum of all member states. I thank you.